Hackers. I first became aware of the term back in 1988 when I was a kid, and I saw Dan Rather on the CBS Evening News talk about Robert Morris Jr., who had just launched the first computer worm.
Former Cornell University graduate student Robert Morris was indicted today for planting a virus that infiltrated more than 6,000 computers across the country. Morris's defense includes that he intended only a low-grade prank. What he touched off instead was a rampant epidemic last November that infected a national defense network of computers, among others. If convicted, he could face up to 5 years in prison, a fine of $250,000, plus restitution to damaged parties.
And then, a decade later, I got to work alongside a real hacker. Kevin Poulsen was at ZDNet before he went to Security Focus and then Wired.
And if you go back before that, I myself was a hacker in the late 80s and the early 90s. I used to hack the phone company quite a bit. It was what the kids today would call an advanced persistent threat. I was like living in their systems for years, and I wound up getting in some trouble for that. In part because I used my access to cheat at radio station phone-in contests and win prizes like Porsches and trips to Hawaii.
In 1994, Kevin Poulsen served 51 months in a federal prison and was banned from using the internet without permission. Some hackers, though, avoided prison altogether.
Celebrating with the broadest of smiles and a kiss from his partner, Larry Love's relief at winning his appeal against extradition to the US was overwhelming.
We're very happy and relieved, and we're very thankful for the High Court, for the judges, for their wisdom and discernment. Thankful for all of the support that we've had, without which I'm not sure I would have made it this far.
The 33-year-old from Suffolk faced charges from US prosecutors of hacking into computers at various American agencies. His lawyers argued his Asperger's and depression would make any extradition oppressive. Today, the High Court agreed.
Only for some hackers, the threat of going to prison proved to be too much.
A brilliant computer programmer, a world-class university, and a federal prosecutor. A three-way collision that some speculate led to a deepening depression for 26-year-old Aaron Swartz. Swartz was best known as the co-founder of Reddit, a widely used social news and entertainment website built around user-submitted content. President Obama even used Reddit to reach more than 5 million voters during his re-election campaign, most of them young people. In his short life, he became a folk hero, pushing to make web content free. But with prosecutors pressing serious charges, Swartz hanged himself Friday at his Brooklyn apartment. His lawyer says he doesn't know what put him over the edge, but the notion of prison time had Swartz deeply worried.
But I know this case was weighing heavily on his mind, and it was a significant source of stress for him.
I started the Hacker Mind podcast, in part, to take back the word hacker, which simply means to take apart. However, in courts and in the media, hackers have been demonized. The organization Hacking is Not a Crime is trying to change that narrative around hacking. In a moment, I'll interview its founder. Welcome to the Hacker Mind, an original podcast from For All Secure. It's about challenging our expectations about the people who hack for a living. I'm Robert Famosi, and in this episode, I'm talking about hacking, specifically ethical hacking, and whether ethical hacking should be legal under certain circumstances. It's a nuanced discussion, and one that I'm happy to share with you in this episode. While I was producing this episode, the United States Justice Department announced an important policy shift. Going forward, it will no longer prosecute good faith security research that would have otherwise violated the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act, or CFAA. Specifically, it said, computer security research is a key driver of improved cybersecurity, Deputy Attorney General Lisa Monaco went on to say the department has never been interested in prosecuting good faith computer security research as a crime, and today's announcement promotes cybersecurity by providing clarity for good faith security researchers who root out vulnerabilities for the common good. So, what is the common good?
My affix pseudonym, handle, moniker, whatever, pretty synonymous with my real life name at this point. I kind of compromise anonymity pretty much with hacking's not a crime, but I mean, even prior to that, I'd kind of been involved in the hacker community, and I'd done some talks and things like that. So whatever you prefer, you can say Bryan McAninch, also known as Affix.
In 2002, I wrote an article for ZDNet called Jail Time is Not the Answer to Cybercrime. I wrote about the pending Cybersecurity Enhancement Act of 2002, or CSEA, and I said, quote, "The problem with this legislation is that it's often very difficult to determine who is responsible for any given cybercrime. Let's say someone hacks into a local power grid, and as a result, a hospital loses power to its critical patient care units. Who is responsible? Is it the hospital, which should have had a power backup? Is it the power utility, which should have maintained better computer security? Or is it the thrill-seeking 13-year-old who probably had no idea what he or she was doing?" Unquote. Further, over the years, I've tried to say criminal hacker where appropriate, and hacker or researcher everywhere else.
Excellent. I wish there were more like you. I've been in touch with some notable names in media, and they've assured me that they'll make a best effort. They've promised me that, when the time comes, we'll have a sit-down interview like this. But it's been an uphill battle because let's face it, the whole image of a hacker draws people in to read articles and advertising on articles and make money off of advertising. So it's kind of a business model, right? It's part of it.
I also noted within that ZDNet article, at the time, the average length of a sentence around the crime of rape was 3 years in the United States. But at times, there have been sentences of over 10 years for violating the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act.
You're never going to understand what it's like to be a rape victim unless you're a rape victim yourself. However, I think people can get a pretty good idea of what something like, the consequence of what they should be for rape. I certainly don't think it should be 3 years, especially if you're comparing it to something like a computer crime or whatever under CFAA. But yeah, that is a really interesting disparity.
So one of the things that I've been asked and wrestle with is how do you make that distinction between someone who's a bad hacker and someone who's a good hacker?
And that's a great question. I'm glad we're able to discuss it because I think there is, my whole idea behind a lot of this was to bring about some unification within the hacker community. And there's been some debate and good debate. The whole point of this was to bring this into public discussion, public discourse. And, let's talk about the nuances of this. And our message is very nuanced. Some have said, well, hacking is a crime. It's, you have the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act, which I think is what Mitnick was probably prosecuted under. So, it's hacking is not a crime, is more of an assertion. Some have said hacking should not be a crime. Well, yeah, we agree with that, but hacking should not be versus hacking is not. We wanted to go a little bit more for the guerrilla marketing type message. So we went with hacking is not. But over the course of the last couple of years, some really valid points have been raised. Mostly, and we tweeted about this just a few days ago, there's a somewhat of a conflation of and distinction between ethics and legality. And we've, from day one, always focused on ethical intent.
And that then becomes the central question. What is ethical hacking?
We could go off on a lot of tangents here. I think, I grew up, as I mentioned, in a lot of subculture circles, and I've always been very anti-establishment, anti-authoritarian type of personality. My mother working 2-3 jobs as a single parent household wasn't around a lot to raise me. I was kind of left to do my own thing. And I would get in trouble. I was mischievous because I didn't have a lot of oversight. But when she was around, she would try to compensate for her lack of being there. Again, she was working 2-3 jobs, so can't blame her for it. But she would try to overcompensate by coming down hard with the hammer. And I think that kind of turned into this snowball effect of well, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to get around what you want, and that kind of evolved into this hacker mindset. So I think when I mentioned all these different permutations of ethics and legality, right? I think there's a lot of unethical things that go on in the world that are completely legal. There's insider trading on massive scales. There's so many socioeconomic injustices in the world that are completely legal because the powers that be make them legal. Because it's the inner circle of trust, so to speak. So I think one of the reasons, like you said, rape and for 3 years or CFAA for 10, I think it's a little bit because our community, our industry, what have you, is it's very esoteric to people. They don't really understand it. And when people don't understand something, they feel threatened by it. When people feel threatened by it, they want to throw the book at you.
Perhaps we should talk about a specific example, something in the media, where we can discuss where to draw the line. Are they ethical or are they criminal? I wrote a book with Kevin Mitnick, a convicted felon. But Kevin, is he a criminal or was he just curious about the world?
With Mitnick, and I'm going off of some very old memory here. I remember in the late 90s when, free Kevin Mitnick thing, 2600 was all on it. And that's kind of right when I got into like security and had an interest in hacking. And I remember reading about his attack. Was it Shimomura's?
Tsutomu Shimomura is a Japanese-American physicist. He's also a computer security expert and is perhaps best known for helping the FBI track and arrest hacker Kevin Mitnick. At this point, Kevin was a known fugitive from the FBI and was using various aliases to stay one step ahead of the FBI. What Kevin was convicted of doing was looking inside Shimomura's computer to see what, if anything, was known about his current whereabouts. It proved to be the thing that got him caught.
I think he used TCP blind IP spoofing. I was reading this and I was like, this is brilliant. Of course, it's a lot more difficult to do now because they have, more entropy and TCP sequence numbers and all these other things. But for that day, that was really cutting edge. I was like, this guy's brilliant. So then I guess the question would be, was what he was doing ethical? I think, Kevin, I respect the guy because of his technical acumen. It was definitely illegal because I think it was, it was someone else's property. He was intruding, I guess one could claim. But I don't know if, I don't really see it as an unethical act because did he do any damage? I don't recall him actually doing any damage. I thought he was just doing it for kicks and giggles kind of thing, right? And correct me if I'm wrong here. Again, this is going off of 25-year-old memory here or something. But it was a really interesting case study. Yeah. Was it a crime? Well, according to the law, it was. I think that kind of burrows down into another level of nuance is, well, is he being ethical by doing it? I don't think he's breaking anything. I don't think he's, holding their data hostage or exposing any sort of intellectual property. I don't even know if the Shimomura, whoever it was, even suffered any loss. I don't know how that was argued in court, but I could argue it was ethical, but it was definitely illegal, according to the CFAA anyway. So
Bryan uses a simple rubric to define hacking and its criminal activity. Imagine a grid of 4 quadrants with ethical and legal forming the X and Y axes. So, in the upper left, you would have ethical and legal, which is what you want to be. Adjacent to this, in the upper right, is ethical illegal. And in the lower left, unethical and legal. And in the lower right, unethical and illegal. Right away, we can dismiss the unethical. That's the red line that hacking is not a crime draws.
So when you're talking about ethics and legality, we have, I'm going to try to keep this straight in my head. You have ethical legal, ethical illegal. You have unethical legal and unethical illegal. So just kind of right off the bat, we in no way support anything that's unethical, whether it's legal or illegal, right? Because we want to narrow down that nuance to what we can really focus on and have an impact with. We fully condone and support ethical legal, obviously, and where we're really trying to have an impact is on the ethical illegal.
So if you're ethical in doing something legal, that's fine. But if you were ethical in doing something illegal, that's where whistleblowers come in. They're the ethical people who see something wrong, and sometimes they must perform an act of civil disobedience or even break the law. This is the ethical illegal side of the quadrant.
I think we've had Daniel Ellsberg, whistleblower type stuff. I think that's important. Transparency in society so that, the constituents know what's really going on. I'll go on the record and say, I'm a fan of Snowden. So things like that, I think there's a conversation to be had about how we approach that. But we've been growing so quickly, just in popularity, that we have to move the needle slowly on the messaging, right? Because we don't want to take some huge leap one way or the other, because then we may gain 10% but lose 20, and now we're losing ground on it. So we've got to move the needle slowly on it.
So how do you move the needle slowly?
We want to, we're advocating for global policy reform. So some of these nuances, I think, have really, again, stirred up some good discussion, but we've gotten a lot of really good, we'll call it feedback. It's a controversial topic, to some degree. A lot of people have a lot of strong feelings about what we're bringing to public discourse. So that's kind of really where we're focusing on.
Staying with the legal for a moment, we have the Digital Millennium Copyright Act, DMCA, in the United States. And it's only recently begun to carve out some areas where hackers are allowed to, look at automobiles and look in certain industries. Maybe it should be broader than that. There's also the right to repair movement in the United States, which I discuss in episode 14 of The Hacker Mind.
Yeah, that's kind of another thing that we support is there's that Right to Repair Coalition, I believe it's called. And, a lot of this kind of gets back to the property rights topic is, if I buy an iPhone, should I be able to modify it? Or if I buy a car, I think there was something last year, I think, there was some legislation going through in Massachusetts that was supposed to set precedent for if you could have the right to repair your own car, or if they effectively want to lock you out and make you go to the dealership or some authorized mechanic, whatever, which of course, then they're going to price gouge you. So we're really big advocates of right to repair, and DMCA obviously falls into that as well.
Again, we can dismiss the unethical. That's the red line.
Yeah, and again, we condone ethical legal. We don't condone unethical legal, unethical illegal, but we do want to see, policy reform globally for ethical illegal. Because there's a lot of unethical legal things going on out there that ethical illegal could fix. Hope that wasn't too confusing. It confused me when I was spinning around in my head thinking about all this one day.
A long time ago, I was told that ethical hacking was not a term that you should use. So how do you feel about calling themselves ethical as opposed to what we just discussed?
That was kind of one of the first concepts I think we came across during our inception, right, of the org, was ethical hacker. We like to say that we believe all hackers are implicitly ethical. So to say that you're an ethical hacker is to say that Matt Blaze had, I'm trying to find it here, he had a really good tweet a couple weeks ago. People who call themselves ethical hackers make me nervous in the same way I make people nervous if I called myself a non-cannibal professor. It's funny, but it's true. I mean, it's almost like saying, "Oh, well, I'm an ethical doctor," or I'm I'm an ethical journalist. Well, I hope you are. I mean,
there's also a list of words on the hackingisnotacrime.org website commonly used within infosec that are being challenged today. For example, instead of saying white hat, we should say hacktivist or researcher or even whistleblower. And instead of saying black hat, we should say attacker or malicious adversary or threat actor. Hacking is Not a Crime is facilitating a discussion around these alternatives.
I think the if I remember correctly, and this is very ironic, I think the whole white hat, black hat thing came out of DEF CON circa 2000, maybe. It was either black hat or DEF CON, I can't remember, but it was meant to kind of differentiate the good guys and the bad guys. I don't know, but you mentioned black and white just don't have the same context anymore. It's kind of like GitHub changing their repos from master and slave to primary, secondary, or whatever they chose to go with. So words matter, intent matters, and so we want to kind of align with that. So we're going with there's so many different names and characters that you could describe with this, but white hack, we want to go with hacktivist. So you could be I'm a hacktivist. I'm a hacker and I'm an activist. So I'm a hacktivist. Security researchers, or even whistleblowers. We recently came across some stuff where there were leaks of personally identifiable information or some sort of previously unknown surveillance of people or employees. I think it's important that things, transparency and whatnot are provided to the public about things like that. So those are what we would consider white hat, quote unquote. Black hat would be very generically an attacker. What's the intent and the motives here? Is this to, is this for the better good, or is this some sort of self-serving kind of intent? So attacker, malicious adversary, threat actor. We do have some people on the internet who have expressed concern about, cyber criminal, I think is what we were originally going with. And I tend to agree, even though I'm a OG kind of hacker, I've been in the game and the community for a long time. The cyber thing just kind of, I never really liked the term personally. So we kind of did away with the cyber criminal thing and was just stuck with more, acceptable terms of attacker or malicious adversary and threat actor, which really kind of get the point across without saying hacker or ethical hacker.
So this really is the Gen X episode of Hacker Mind. If you came of age in the 80s and 90s, you may remember this. Skateboarding was huge. Everybody had a board, even I. And this amazing ability to stay on my feet after a major wipeout. But that's a story for another day. Bryan was also into skateboarding, and this was before skate parks. This was when you would skate anywhere you possibly could, including public and private property.
The whole story really goes back to kind of my childhood days. I don't know. There's a couple places I could start, but I'll kind of we can move back a little earlier than this point in life. But when I was young, I was a skateboarder in the 80s, and I was your prototypical Gen Xer. My parents were divorced. Dad was pursuing his career around the country. So it was a single parent household. Mom worked 2, sometimes 3 jobs. So we were kind of poor. And, I had the luxury of building half pipes in my backyard. I didn't have the luxury of skating swimming pools like they do in San Diego. They don't have pools in Ohio. So I was skateboarding, and my only option would be to skate on public and private property, whether they were like, stairs and handrails or embankments or curbs or whatever it was. And at the time, I was, I skated from the age of 6 to 14, maybe. During that time, probably when I was about 12, I didn't really understand the concept of property rights, public-private property and things like that. But the police would harass us and many skateboarders just for, being out with their friends. And in retrospect, private property, okay, I get it. And then, at that time, there was the whole skate and destroy mantra, which probably didn't kind of lend itself to our pristine character. But police would harass us on both private and public property. And so public's a little different. It could be a park, it could be a police station, it could be a city hall, something like that, which is taxpayer subsidized. So it got to a point where just in my small town that I grew up in, several parents got together and petitioned City Hall and said, "Hey, look, we understand the private property is one thing. If they get their permission, it should be fine. But on public grounds, this is taxpayer funded, and our kids should be able to skate there." Kind of a not quite the First Amendment kind of thing, but it's the same concept, right? It's public property. We should be able to go and use these facilities and just be able to skate around. And it was about that time that a skateboarding is not a crime sticker came out. It was pretty popular. And I think, kind of fast forwarding however many years that was, it was 2018. I was sitting down with Wirefall, who's one of my local hacker friends here in Dallas. He's the founder of Dallas Hackers Association. And we were sitting down after a meetup having a beer. He's kind of OG like me, goes way back. And we were just, however it got brought up, we were talking about the stereotype and the derogatory imaging and whatnot of hackers in the hacking community. And we were talking about the imagery, the hoodies and things like that. And it just kind of, I just kind of blurted out. I was like, yeah, hacking's not a crime. And then bloop, in my head, skateboarding's not a crime. That was something, a little nostalgic, but then I was like, that sticker really took off. So I designed kind of a prototype for it. And there was another gentleman from the Dallas hacker community by the handle Unspecific, or otherwise Mad Hat. And he's really into like graphic arts design and stuff. So he helped me kind of brush up our sticker design. And in 2018, I bought 500 of them on Sticker Mule and took them to DEF CON, and they were gone in like the first day. It's like, okay, I didn't have time to order more, but the next year in 2019, I took 5,000, and I didn't attend a single talk. I just handed out stickers, and it kind of just, it started taking off from there, I think. And then in 2020 pandemic, DEF CON was all virtual. And, I had the Twitter account I had set up in 2018. I had tweeted this video. It's pinned on our Twitter account, Hack Not Crime. It's something to the effect of what most people think hacking is versus what hacking really is. And it's this short video. It starts off with this up tempo, like techno beat. And it's showing all these like flashy graphics of encryption, decryption, payload unloading, things like that. And it cuts over to this guy coding Java, and he, hits a button, and he gets this IO error for Heroku, something, whatever it was. And he goes over to Google to troubleshoot it. It's kind of the iterative learning process, right? Of hacking. You try something, it breaks, go back, try it a different way. So anyway, in a nutshell, in summary, that's kind of the short version of a long story of where it kind of originated, the concept, and where hacking's not a crime came from. And I've always, for some reason or another, I've always been kind of affiliated with some sort of subculture. I don't know why. I just enjoy being part of the outer circle of society. But I mean, it's very much like what skateboarders were going through in the 80s. But I think, with all due respect to current skateboarders, of course, I think our cause has a potential for a much greater impact on society, because as we become more dependent on technology and security, more dependent on technology, security and privacy is going to become more important in our lives. So, yeah, I'll stop there.
So given that Bryan and I agree on these terms, even share some of the history, has there been any pushback within the security community? Do people want to see hackers dismissed as pejorative, or do they want to embrace the term hackers once again?
Not so much infosec, and for like the hacker community that I'm part of, there's been some detractors who, I won't go into names here. I don't want to call them out or anything, but we've gotten some DMs on Twitter and emails, and again, our message is very nuanced. So I think sometimes people misunderstand some of it and take it for, oh, well, what about, just talking about Kevin Mitnick. What about Kevin Mitnick? Hacking is a crime. He was prosecuted. So you've got the world out there who's not part of the hacking community that just, they don't understand it at all, which is mostly why we're trying to spread this message. It's the point of our cause. But within the hacking community as well, there are people who feel that, maybe a bit more anti-establishment, that want to, as I mentioned a moment ago, uncover unethical things. And so then we get into a discussion of, well, if you've compromised somebody and you've exposed some sort of unethical act, is that considered ethical? And that's part of the debate now, right? And again, that's why we formed this. We want to have those conversations. So.
So perhaps you've seen the stickers, "Hacking is not a crime." They're well designed, and they're showing up at security conferences and in security videos on YouTube.
I think really what helped us grow so quickly, almost too quickly, it's admittedly been kind of a struggle at times to keep things from boiling over, just growth. But we, the guerrilla marketing has been why things have caught on so quickly. It's part of the branding, the logo, and that's the reality of running a nonprofit or a business, or even personally. People have personal branding, right? So you've got to market yourself or whatever it is you're representing. And part of that, with that assertion that hacking is not a crime, over the course of the last couple of years, we've had a lot of lively public discourse about things like this. And we're finding other nuances outside of the scope that we were originally focused on, right? So I brought up, whistleblowers and stuff earlier. I think it's very ethical to expose unethical things, and so we're slowly moving the goalposts a little bit to kind of encompass elements of that type of mindset as well. Because as I mentioned before, as we become more dependent on technology, so too will our personal privacy and security be impacted. And if we're not actively looking for vulnerabilities or actively exposing unethical acts, I think just as a global society at this point, we're all going to suffer in the end. So I know we've got some folks out there that don't necessarily agree with us, but I encourage them to be patient and as supportive as they're willing to be, because I really want to make this a unifying theme among the hacker community. because I think a lot of our societies, things are very divisive right now, and I would hate to see I'd hate to see something like that happen to the hacker community, because I think there's a lot of really great people out there. We just need to have that public discourse and come to an understanding of everyone's wants and needs.
And so your point then is, how do you start a nuanced discussion about hacking? How do you clarify that it's nuanced up front and still have that conversation?
Yeah, well, I mean, we've had some recent updates to our website that, call out, specifically, here, I'll actually read it. I just had it pulled up. Hacker is simply an inquisitive, critical thinker who solves complex problems with unorthodox means. The actions and methods by which these problems are solved, be they social, financial, economic, political, technological, or otherwise, is called hacking. So, you've got the whole life hacker. There's a website called like Life Hacker or something like that. Lifehacker.com, I think. Okay, yeah, technically you're kind of, doing something in an unorthodox manner, you're hacking something. But I think hacking, the mindset can be applied in so many different contexts. So we wanted to clarify just right up front on our website that it could be social, financial, economic, political. It doesn't have to just be technological, which is where hacking's really been focused. But getting back to my earlier point, we're more and more dependent on technology, but it's a means to an end of maybe some of the other ones, right? The social, political, economic, whatever.
After this podcast, head over to hackingisnotacrime.org. There you will see a few terms that are certainly up for discussion.
Throughout the last year and a half, we've reached out to a lot of different media outlets. Our site states very clearly that a lot of this image and characterization of hackers in the hacking community comes out of global media and pop culture sources. And, to the point we were talking about earlier, fear, uncertainty, doubt tactics draw in viewers, link clicks, or what have you, because it generates revenue off of that. So, and the same for, movie plots. You've got to have a villain. You've got to have a compelling plot. Let's have a evil hacker, right?
Hello, friend. Hello, friend. That's lame. Maybe I should give you a name.
They do have some good movies like Hackers.
Hack the planet! Hack the planet! Shut up and get in the car.
And I hate to even bring up Swordfish, but the guy was, God, that movie was bad, but it was like cheesy bad, right?
Ever heard of Operation Swordfish?
Nope.
It's a sweet deal. $9.5 billion. Do you have any idea of how much money that is? We go in over the phone lines, pop the firewall, sit back, wait for the money.
John Travolta, Hugh Jackman, Halle Berry, and Don Cheadle. Swordfish.
Where we've really started to focus just in the last couple of years is just spreading awareness, laying the groundwork, and then having open conversations with people like yourself. We've talked to some other digital rights groups. We've got some really good partnerships going. We've got a couple, I've lost count now, 100 and something plus advocates out there advocating our message. We're currently in the process of building out local chapters. These advocates would kind of lead those endeavors. And being that they're located, we've got a global presence now: Asia, Africa, Europe, North America, South America. I'll leave out any. We've got some in Australia. We don't have anything in Antarctica yet, but the idea is to kind of grassroots movement. Start it small, get some community involvement at the local level, and then grow from there. So, start at the top, get the awareness out, and then bring it directly down to the bottom and grow it from the ground up. So that's kind of the approach we've been taking.
So beyond coming up with clever mantras and beyond coming up with stickers and new names for old terms, so what would a local leader within Hacking is Not a Crime be asked to do?
So, our primary responsibilities at the high level is mostly branding, marketing, getting the message out, managing Twitter account and Discord and, all of our other communications channels, LinkedIn, Facebook, what have you. At the local level, what we're trying to do is kind of offset, particularly myself, specifically offset some of the logistics challenges. I obviously can't be in 3 places at once or more. So when there's conferences at a local level, we want to send out advocates. Maybe they're nearby, kind of just, spread the workload a little bit more evenly. And then, we would continue, as we have been, having conversations like this one, where we can speak on behalf of the organization itself.
So if this is the Gen X version of the hacker mind, then what about Gen Z, the up-and-coming generation of young hackers? Is there still some sort of impetus to become a hacker today, given the ubiquity of computers and digital devices, as opposed to when they were unique and cool back in the 80s and 90s, when the internet wasn't even around? You had to dial up to a BBS to learn anything.
That's a good question. I haven't been asked that one. I think, I do a lot of mentoring, both at a meetup that I organized and some local high schools here in our school district where I live for kids. And, I get a lot of questions about what certification would I need to get, what career path, and all these different things. And I've advised them, kind of looking back on my own. When I got in, I've been in tech all my life. I've been coding since I was 8. So when the .com era hit, it was like, oh, this is this is a great opportunity. And that coupled with my kind of subversive personality, hacking and security were just a really good fit. But back then, to your point, technology wasn't quite as ubiquitous. There wasn't as much specialization. So I was kind of a jack of all trades. I was a coder by nature, but I got into networking security, picked up Linux. My first Linux distro, I actually bought it, was Red Hat 5.1. And, I was a jack of all trades. So I knew a little bit of everything. And now it's a lot more difficult to really, especially if you're young, I think it's really difficult to identify what you really like, because it all looks so appealing. Now you've got, in addition to all the other things that have evolved, and as quickly as they have evolved, you've now got cloud and IoT. You've got some folks that are, interested in industrial control systems, because that's kind of an untouched area, even though it's been around. It's kind of legacy systems, but that's kind of a new landscape. Artificial intelligence with machine learning algorithms and things like that. So you've got all these different applications of privacy and security that you could specialize in, but it's really daunting to kind of understand, well, how do I get to that? And so I've always kind of defaulted to, pick up coding first and foremost, because I think that really lays a foundation for having that logical mindset, understanding what exceptions to the rules are, I think is really paramount in the hacker mindset. There's never, if you're presented with 2 options, there's always a third one, right? And then, based off of whatever their interests are, whatever they're most passionate about, I've often advised people to pursue that path, that really get a solid foundation on the legacy technology or legacy concepts of coding, networking, and system administration type stuff. So I think a lot of up and coming hackers now have the benefit of tons and tons of information available to them. But I think it can also, choice is great, but there can also be too much choice where you're overwhelmed with it and really don't know where to begin. So I think there's a bit of a pro and con. It kind of cuts both ways. Whereas I could definitively say, yeah, I want to go do this, and I want to focus on hardware or software or whatever it was. I think the next generation of hackers, if we want to call them that, have a lot of choices, but it may be difficult for them to really hone in and identify what their passion and focus might want to be.
I guess I'm wondering whether we're going to get another generation of curious hackers, or if this type of work becomes vocational and becomes expected, that of course you know how to do computer security. Of course you know how to do these things.
Yeah, good question. I think there's part of our mission is the influence that media and pop culture has on how our character is characterized, our persona is characterized. So I have met a lot of people that their first idea of what a hacker is or what a hacker does might be something like Mr. Robot. Not necessarily bad in a sense. I mean, it does get people. Maybe it inspires them to pick up coding, or I saw a command prompt. What was he doing? And they find out it's Linux, and maybe they discover Linux. Vocational. Yeah, I mean, I think it cuts both ways there too. I mean, it could just be. Maybe all along they've had this kind of itch with science and technology. We didn't really cover that part of like my childhood, but that's certainly where I started. So with this being a lot more prominent in society for good or bad, however the hackers are portrayed, I think there is some benefit that it might just kind of inspire the next generation to pick up a book and read about computer networking, or maybe teach themselves how to code or something.
I did an episode with Jack Cable last year. He's an incredibly impressive young man doing so many things at the age of 22. Yeah, he struck me that he was identified early and went mainstream working with the government and CISA and Beau Woods. But also what we talked about was his ransomware thing, where, he had a friend who had an uncle who had a problem with ransomware, and just off the cuff, Jack was able to fix it. I'm wondering if we still have that wildness, whether you still have that curiosity in the young people coming in.
The ones I'm working with are seniors, and it's part of like this capstone project that they do is they call it an independent study and mentorship. So they each of the students, whatever field they want to go in, reach out to someone in the local community for that field. And my name I own a startup, and if you look up cybersecurity Dallas, it's in the top 10, right? So my name pops up, and I've been contacted several times for that. So, but it is a lot of fun. They're all seniors. They're very, very passionate, which I love to see. The first student, I'm trying to think back, was it 20? I think it was 2016. The first mentee I worked with found an IDOR vulnerability in this image posting website, reported it, and got a CVE assigned for it. This is a senior in high school. So just right off the bat, this guy's got a CVE he can put on his resume. I found this as part of my capstone project. I think that's really cool.
I'd like to thank Bryan for discussing the term hacker and sharing his personal history as well. Not everyone who hacks is a bad actor, and not everyone who takes things apart should be demonized. Yeah, there are TV shows, movies, and even podcasts that glorify the crimes of some people who hack. And that's probably fine if they're called out as criminal hackers. But the vast majority of us are just curious and sometimes have real need to expose wrongdoing in the world today. It's great that the US Justice Department is enlightened enough to recognize security research as being done for the common good. Let's continue to push that envelope. Let's continue to see hackers as they are, hyper-bright, curious people. And please, feel free to talk about the criminal hackers as just that. Hey, if you enjoy this podcast, tell a friend. I bet there are others who like commercial-free narrative information security podcasts. I have so many stories about hackers who are making a positive difference in the world. I don't want you to miss out. Let's keep this conversation going. DM me at Robert Vamosi on Twitter or join me on Discord. You can find the deets at hackermind.com. The Hacker Mind is brought to you every 2 weeks, commercial-free by For All Secure. For the Hacker Mind, I remain the not criminal, just a hacker, Robert Vamosi.